May I speak in the name of the living God, creating, redeeming, sustaining. Amen. Amen. Today is Doubting Thomas Sunday. Every year on this second Sunday of Easter, we read the story of so-called Doubting Thomas. The church, in her wisdom, must believe that this is a story we need to hear at least annually. Doubting Thomas Sunday. And so, today, we are going to talk about doubt. But before we do, we need to say a few words about fear. The doors were locked for fear of the Jews. Now, these words were written some 70 or 80 or possibly 90 years after the life of Jesus. Most likely, they are by a second generation writer, 2 generations after Jesus. And at that time, the church is still a Jewish sect. There are Jewish Christians, and there are other Jewish sects as well. And is not uncommon among religious siblings. There was tension. There was tension between them, and there was tension among the entire Jewish population, including the Jewish Christians, with the Roman Empire. And so these words are included, and we see them most especially in the Gospels around the time of Jesus' trial and crucifixion. Similar words, similar intent to display the odds, the tension, and, dare we say, the superiority of the Jewish Christians. And sadly, over the centuries, this has been part of the contribution towards anti-Semitism. And the church must bear its own responsibility for this. Now, about doubt. So last Sunday, the disciples were gathered, and Jesus appeared to them and said, "Peace be with you." So, as you would expect, Thomas wasn't there, and so they told him, "We've seen the Lord." Now, Thomas, for 2,000 years now, has been labeled as the doubter, Doubting Thomas. But he only doubted for 1 week. In the world of doubting, that really does not count for very much. I dare say there's at least one of us here who has doubted for a lot longer than that. So they were gathered today, this evening. And Jesus appeared. And right there in front of Thomas. And Thomas was able to confess his faith, my Lord and my God. Now notice, if we step back to that conversation with Thomas and the disciples, it wasn't so much that Thomas was doubting. What Thomas said was, I want first-hand experience. And isn't that the experience we all want of the living Christ? We don't want to just know from someone else, happy as we are to receive that. But we want the experience ourselves. Unless I can put my finger there and my hand here, how can I believe? Several years ago, or no, just a few years ago, I think it was in 2021. 1921 was a while back. Brian McLaren, who is a writer and a teacher, and we could call him a public theologian, he wrote a book entitled Faith After Doubt. And there he outlined what we might think of as 4 stages of a faithful life, and how doubt can really be the basis for coming to a deeper and more expansive faith. We could call them stages, if you will, but really they are like rings in a tree where you start out in one place and then you grow larger and larger and up and deeper as well. So those 4 rings begin with simplicity. A very simplistic way of coming to faith where it's really quite dualistic. It's black and white, no gray in between. And it typically comes from an outside authority. It is a faith of simplicity. But after a while, as we have life experience, we bump into those places that are really quite gray. And we begin to doubt if this is really the way the world and my faith work. And that doubt can lead us to the second ring, which is complexity. We begin to see that the world is a little more nuanced than just sheep and goats. Black and white, right and wrong, yes and no. There's a lot of, I'm just not so sure. It's complex. It's complicated. And then after a while, living in that ring of complexity, we bump into something or other that says, yes, it's complex, it's complicated, and I don't get it. It's beyond my understanding. And what do? We begin to doubt. And that doubting moves us to the third ring, which is perplexity. Perplexity is often not a place we want to go, but perplexity is exactly what the parables of Jesus did. For instance, take the parable of the Good Samaritan, where Jesus tells the story of someone who could not possibly be good. Good Samaritan is an oxymoron. And yet that's the story that Jesus told, and it threw their minds into such confusion or such perplexity that they had no choice but to become more open and to grow deeper in their faith. So that's the third ring. The fourth ring is harmony. Harmony is the place where we begin to be able to live with unknowing. The place where it's okay not to know, and that we live with an acceptance and a gratitude and an understanding that some things are just beyond us. There's a famous book written in the 14th century by an anonymous author. It's called The Cloud of Unknowing. It's a book on Christian mysticism and contemplative prayer. Now, when I think of the cloud of unknowing, I begin to think of that cloud that all of us deal with every single day, that cloud of virtual reality, that cloud where we pay to store things up there, out there somewhere, and that is truly a cloud of unknowing. But how often in our faith are we called to live with our head in the cloud? A place where we can know the presence of God, but is beyond our knowing and ability to describe. So Pope Francis died this past week, and the movie The Conclave, which came out last year and it won one Academy Award, has come to our attention as the conclave is about to meet. And in that film, Ralph Fiennes plays Cardinal Lawrence. Cardinal Lawrence is the dean of the College of Cardinals. So that makes him number 2 only to the Pope. And Cardinal Lawrence says, if there is only certainty and no doubt, there would be no mystery. If there is only certainty and no doubt, there would be no mystery. Mystery is the truth and reality beyond our ability to reason or explain. Mystery is the truth and the reality of unknowingness of life in the divine. Mystery is such that we ultimately cannot access it with our minds, but only in our experience. We access mystery through poetry and music and a meal. Sunday after Sunday, we are invited to share in the great mystery of faith. Sunday after Sunday, we are invited to come with our unknowing and our uncertainty and our doubt, and to offer them as a holy and living sacrifice of praise. And in so doing, we receive holy nourishment. Sunday after Sunday, we bring our unknowing, our uncertainty, and our doubt, and invited to offer them so that along with Thomas, each in our own words, each in our own way, we may be able to offer our confession to my Lord and my God. Amen.